FM25 has officially been given its release date, the game has been officially announced, and today we're going to break down that news that we were given today, as well as everything that we know up to this point about the next iteration in the Football Manager series. We've also got a roadmap given to us by Sports Interactive on their website, which shows what's coming next, so we can speculate what we might see down the line. We'll be breaking it all down for you today, but there's a lot to get into, so let's get right into it. So as you can see on the Football Manager website, it's all updated now to be FM25 themed. It says welcome to the new era, and this is what they've been pushing for a long time, that this new Football Manager is almost going to be like Football Manager 2, a sequel to what you've been playing, as opposed to just a yearly iteration that we have been getting with a few changes. This is where things are really going to change, and they've been working on this behind the scenes for a long time. The first thing that I can point out isn't necessarily anything major, but they have updated the Football Manager logo, and there's a new emblem too, which is a football with FM inside of it. So if you like that kind of thing, there you go. But the real information we're all here for is this. The game is going to be out on the 26th of November, which is of course a little bit later than Football Manager normally comes out. Often we get the 2-week beta period towards the end of October, and then early November we see the game released. So it looks like it's been pushed back a few weeks or so. Now before we get on to anything else, let's talk a little bit about the pre-order. So if you hit this pre-purchase button, it takes you onto the screen where you can see the information about all the pre-orders. So the console, touch and mobile versions aren't available yet, but as you can see, it is coming back to Game Pass on console and PS5 on the day of release. There's also FM Mobile coming back on Netflix, and there's also FM Touch coming to Nintendo Switch. But the main thing that I imagine most of you are going to get is the full normal Football Manager game. That's going to be available on Steam, Epic and all your other normal places that you can get the game from. Now if you do pre-purchase it looks like you get 10% off the full game price, but I would say hold fire on that. I'll put it in the description as soon as we've got it, but there's likely going to be an FMSCOUT pre-order code. We do get one every single year, so I would say hold fire until we've got that, just to save yourself a little bit more money. And I imagine most of you won't be hitting pre-order yet because we haven't really got too much information about the new game just yet. But there we go, that is when the game is released. One thing to note though is there is no mention just yet of a beta period, or at least one that I couldn't find. Like I say, normally the game comes out 2 weeks earlier for pre-orderers, and we kind of test the game before it really comes out, see what's working, report bugs, and then usually SI fix it for the full release. But there is no mention of that here just yet. Maybe it just hasn't been set in stone, so they didn't want to reveal when. But as of right now, that beta isn't mentioned or shown anywhere from what I can see. So it is one of those things where I feel like if you were going to get it, they would mention it when you pre-order the game. So the fact it's not there makes me think we might not see it. Back to FM25 though, and this page has some information on it about what's coming to the new game. Of course, the main thing and one of the main topics everyone's been speaking about when it comes to the new Football Manager is women's football, which is being added to the game in one integrated world. So you could go from, in theory, managing the Manchester United men's team and then go to the Manchester United women's team. It's all in one environment. It's not like you'll choose 2 different game modes for men or women's football. Now I know there'll be some people that say that they don't see the point in this and they're not going to play it, which is fine if you don't want to play it, but I think there will be some people that will, and there'll be some people that get into Football Manager purely through playing the women's side of football. So I'm glad that it's been introduced personally, but I do understand the sentiment that there has been recently about some things being removed to make way for women's football, which I don't quite think is the case, but we'll talk a little bit more about those removals and the new additions that we're getting in a few minutes. But let's quickly cover everything on this page. Women's football, as mentioned, the Premier League license, which is another thing which was promoted heavily before FM25's release date was announced. The Premier League for the first time is coming to the game, so that'll be player faces, it'll be logos, it'll be kits. It just makes the game feel a lot more professional, and hopefully will make the onboarding process of new players coming in, where most people will manage in the Premier League, they'll now be able to slot straight in and it all looks great. Whereas before, when you looked at a player, it would just be like a grayed out face, which obviously isn't something that as a new player is going to really attract you to the game. And of course, the main thing, and the reason the game's been delayed a little bit longer, and the reason this is such a change for Football Manager, is the game is now powered by Unity. It's been built from the ground up on a new engine. The interface is going to change outside of the game. We're expecting some match engine changes as well, and that leads us nicely, I think, onto the roadmap, which as of right now isn't really open for use just yet, put it that way. So it's listing all the things that we're going to see, but not telling us when. But this still does give us an idea of what we can expect, and also when you can expect the newest news here on the FMSCOUT channel. So the first thing we've got is October the 7th, we'll be learning about women's football. So that's in about a week's time from now. I imagine we'll get information on how many players are in the women's football database being added, and of course, which teams you'll be able to manage. And that's obviously great and a nice addition. Then they don't give exact dates for what to to expect, but it looks like there's going to be changes to the interface, which we already know, of course. The menus are going to look completely different, if you want to call them menus. They've already shared some almost in-development screenshots of kind of thing we might be able to expect. They did say it wasn't finalized, but it does look pretty different, and it seems like Football Manager is going for more of a game feel than what we're currently used to in FM, which is more of like a spreadsheet kind of experience when you're playing the game. We're then going to get some information about tactics. That might be new roles. I really doubt they've had time to build tactics from the ground up, but just so you know, it was actually a few years ago that they were putting out applications for people to work on the Unity engine for Sports Interactive. So this has been in development for a long while, and Miles has mentioned that in previous posts. That's the guy that runs Sports Interactive. He has said that this has been something they've been working on for a while. They wanted to do it a year or so back, I believe, but then COVID messed the time frame up. But yes, we're going to see some changes to tactics. What that will be, I don't actually know yet. They haven't even given a little inkling about that just now. Then there's a match experience, which will hopefully show us what the in-game engine is going to look like and if there's been any major changes. I know a lot of people are expecting everything to change. I know some people are thinking that nothing will change because they've focused on everything else, and maybe the match engine changes will come another year or so down the line. Who knows? But that's where we'll find out about that and hopefully get our first look at it. Your Manager, I have no idea what this is or what it's going to relate to. My initial guess is that it's going to be related to when you create your manager in game and you dress him up and you make him look how you want, but I don't feel like they'll do a whole post about that. So unless there's been some changes in terms of attributes that you allocate your manager, coaching badges, how they work, I'm not sure. All speculation at this point, but there's something that's going to change for your manager here. Then there's the FM25 mobile focus, which will be all about FM25 mobile. Then the deeper dive. This is usually where they reveal some changes that most people aren't going to notice. It's almost like patch notes really from the last game, but still some interesting information will be in there. Then you've got the information about console and then the information about FM25 touch. Whether they're going to do these weekly, I don't know, but if you kind of line it up to say this is the 7th of October, interface on the 14th, tactics on the 21st, match experience on the 28th, then you get into November time where you've got 1 week, 2 week, 3 week, 4 weeks worth of content, 5 there before the game comes out. Obviously there's going to be some where they might do 2 in a week, but it looks like that's the kind of schedule we're going to be getting, maybe weekly reveals, but that is pure speculation at this point. So we've been given a release date, we know when to expect some extra information about the game and what that information is going to be. Women's football, interface changes, your manager, whatever that means, who knows yet. But of course there's some information that we already know about the game, and if you've been keeping up with the FM news sources online, you'll know a lot of it hasn't been totally positive. All the information about what we know so far has been compiled very nicely on this article on the FMSCOUT website, which I will link down below for you guys. This is everything that we knew prior to today, and there's lots of information here. And on this article, we have the first news that we ever got about the game. That was when FM24 was announced, and they announced at the same time that FM25 was going to be this new era for Football Manager. It was coming onto a new engine, so they've had a lot of time here to feel a lot of pressure from the FM community for over a year now since it was initially announced. There's also new technology for new gens and manager creation, which I suppose will link to that Your Manager thing from earlier. New gens, hopefully we get some proper faces and not those horrible cartoon baby looking faces that you currently get on new gen players. Vastly improved AI and animations, women's football, and the ability to transfer your save from FM24 to FM25. Great, we knew that long ago, but what have we learnt since? Well, on the 27th of June 2024, so a few months back, that's when we got our first development update for FM25, and this is where the PR slightly went downhill for the new game, because after saying all that great stuff, they then announced some things they were removing, which caused some backlash in the community, even though some of it maybe isn't that big of a change and maybe not that big of a deal, but I'll let you make your minds up. I'll just tell you everything that's happened. The first one is touchline shouts are being removed and probably won't come back for the foreseeable future. They basically said that touchline shouts didn't actually work the way that they wanted them to. Of course, as we all know, if you made a shouting game, you had to actually wait for a break in play, like a substitution or the ball to go out for it to take effect, which probably wasn't right anyway. Whether they could have reworked that, I don't know, but I think they've just chose to prioritize other stuff and remove touchline shouts. But I don't think that's the end of the world. The same goes for chalkboard. If there's anyone that's annoyed about that, I'd be surprised, because the chalkboard was basically useless once Data Hub came in a couple of years ago. Creator Club is being removed, but will make a return in FM26, so in a year's time. I think that will be a miss for the people that use it, but they showed the stats and said most people didn't use Creator Club, and personally, I haven't, but it's always sad to lose an aspect of the game game that some people might play, and the same goes for versus mode. Might return one day, possibly not for the next FM, but right now they're focusing on different things. Challenge mode is something that used to exist on Full Fat Football Manager, the PC version. I don't know if it still does on the mobiles and the touch, but it used to be like short-term saves where you could jump in for, say, a team that's in the relegation zone with 10 matches to play and try and keep them up. The Great Escape, I think that one was called. Plenty of other challenges too, so that'd be cool for that to come back down the line sometimes. And then there's Fantasy Draft, which isn't available straight away, but will return later in the FM25 life cycle and then be added to the game. So that's when things looked a little bit more murky for FM25, where they basically did an announcement post saying everything that was going to be taken away, but they then did show us some preliminary screenshots of what the game could look like in the new engine in terms of the menus, and it was a much different system to what we currently look at. They had the inbox being replaced by something called the portal, which did actually look like it made more sense and was more fluid, but you guys be the judge of that. And like I say, these images were not finalized, so we can't really take too much from it, although I assume probably is what it's going to look like if we're seeing images like that. There was also the introduction of tiles and cards. The idea of this is information would be given to you at a very brief level on your screen, and then if you click into that section, you'll then get further detail. The idea of it was to reduce the amounts of clicks and in-game screens that there was, which is something that is quite overwhelming for new players. I know most of you watching this probably do play FM already, and you probably understand how it all works, so it's not really that much of a change for you, but I promise you, when new players start, and you might remember yourself, the game can feel pretty overwhelming. Then we get onto the Premier League license, which we covered. I don't need to talk about that anymore. That was a nice addition that we found in June. And then September came around about a month ago now. That's when we got even more information that murkied the waters further in terms of the hype around the new game, because they announced once more that something else was being removed, and that was international management, which is no longer going to be a playable mode. They want to bring it back in the future. It will be on FM25 mobile, but not in the actual FM25 touch, console, or the real game, which is obviously a shame. International management needed a lot of work, don't get me wrong, and they did say they wanted to, but they basically didn't have time with all the other changes going on. So it will be nice to see that make a comeback, but I think especially, and this has been spoke about quite a lot, with women's football coming in, I think international management would have been a great step to get people to move into the women's game as well and get them using it. And because personally, I don't know too much about club football at women's level, but I have watched the Lionesses, and maybe that would have been a good save to do, and that could have provided an inroad into the women's football saves that you might end up trying in the new game. So it is a shame all around that international management is missing. There's no denying that. They also said weight is no longer going to be shown on player profiles. We've spoken about this at length on the channel already. I personally don't think it's the end of the world. I don't think many people even looked at it anyway. Then we got the announcement that the game was being delayed from its normal release slot. The thing that surprised me with this is they hadn't actually announced a release date yet, just the game usually releases around the same time in early November every year. So they probably could have got away with this by just not saying that it was being delayed and just saying it was coming out end of November. But I'm sure there would have been questions actually, so maybe that was the best way for them to go about it. But that was all that we knew before today, and you could see why there was a lot of confusion around the game. Maybe not confusion, but a lack of hype, because they basically talked about a year and a half ago and how great it was going to be, and since then it's kind of just been things that are going to get removed. So it will be nice to see new things that are coming to the game to try and get the hype back up again. It really does seem like they've put a lot of effort into the new Football Manager, so I really hope it comes off for them. I hope all the changes work. There's going to be teething problems, of course, but as we continue through this roadmap and learn more about the game, that will hopefully help build up the anticipation a bit more for the new Football Manager, which I'm certainly looking forward to. Let me know if you are. Remember, I would say hold off on the pre-orders for a little bit, because there'll be codes out there. Even if it's not the FMSCOUT code, there'll be other creators that you might enjoy that will have a code to get you even more money off. So I would say hold fire and wait for that. But there you go. That's everything that we know about FM25 so far. A release date too. Let me know your thoughts down below, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.